I guess we're good.
Yeah, we are on. We are live. We're just going to wait for more people to join us. Or for anyone to
For
join
any
us.
people to join us. Collect our last notes. Oh, yay, someone's here.
Coming more group so we can see comments this time. I think we actually.
Yeah, we did it right this time.
Last time we were on, we weren't able to see anyone's comments, so we asked the icebreaker question and couldn't get any responses.
Yeah.
For any interaction.
But this time we can. So if you have a comment, we can see it this time.
Hopefully. I have no comments yet, so.
So we're getting ready to read Mark 15 verses 1 through 15, right? 1 through 15. Yep. So we're kind of getting ready to near the end of the Gospel of Mark. We've got maybe 4 or 5 days left, I think.
Yeah, I think 4 more days after us. 3 more days after us.
Yeah. We'll hang out for a few more minutes.
3rd, I believe.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean
to. No, you're fine.
We do our icebreaker.
All right. Well, today's nice weather. The humidity dropped, at least where we live. Which, if you don't live in Ohio, it can be pretty humid here, or anywhere in the Midwest. But what would your favorite cookout food be?
Since we had Memorial Day.
Yeah, since we just had Memorial Day, and I really want to have a bratwurst soon with some mustard and a bun, probably like 3 or 4 of them, and some potato chips. What would your favorite cookout food be?
Yeah. I don't know. Because what I like is like the fruit tray or like the veggies.
It always gets flies on it though.
It's true. I like the dessert, but I don't know if I like anything that you actually like cook out. So I don't know if I have a favorite cookout food.
How about like
just fresh fruit is always nice in this
drink, like lemonade or anything like that?
Coca-Cola. That's my favorite summer beverage, I guess you could say. Right, we have a few more people coming in. We've got our passage posted over there. So again, we're reading Mark chapter 15, verses 1 through 15. We're kind of just following along with the other, like the other folks who have been doing this, so similar format. So as we're reading, be thinking about what does this tell us about God? What does this tell us about people? And who can we tell, and how does this apply? So do you want to start? You can read.
Yeah. I'm going to start by reading the passage. This is Mark 15, 1 through 15. Jesus before Pilate. Very early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin reached a decision. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Are you the king of the Jews? Asked Pilate. Yes, it is as you say, Jesus replied. The chief priests accused him of many things. So again Pilate asked him, aren't you going to answer? Say how many things they are accusing you of? But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Now it was the custom of the feast to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas.
Yep.
Awesome, said it right. Was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? Asked Pilate, knowing it was out of envy that the chief priest had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have Pilate released Barabbas instead. What shall I do then with the one you call king of the Jews? Pilate asked them. Crucify him, they shouted. Why? What crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, Crucify him. Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed over to be crucified.
Okay, so I'll kind of summarize.
Yep.
The passage starts saying that the whole Sanhedrin had reached a decision and they bound him and led him away to be handed over to Pilate. So I think it's important to note that what the decision it seems that the Sanhedrin reached was that they would ask that Pilate tried Jesus for treason as opposed to blasphemy, because Pilate was like a Roman political leader and not a Jew. So they bring him to Pilate, and Pilate asks if he's king of the Jews, and Jesus confirms that, and the chief priests continue to accuse him of many things. And Pilate continues to be amazed at Jesus' silence in particular, and that Pilate's not finding fault in Jesus. The chief priests in the meantime are stirring up the crowd. So when Pilate offers the chance to release Barabbas or Jesus, the crowd shouts that they would like Barabbas to be released instead. And they call for Pilate to crucify Jesus as the king of the Jews. And so Pilate makes this decision not so much on like his finding of fault in Jesus, but on the will of the crowd. So Jesus is handed over to be crucified. Tough part of scripture. This is like always a hard read.
Yeah, this is.
So first question, what does this tell us about God?
When I started, you want me to?
You can start.
Okay.
I'll collect my thoughts while you go.
This was hard because what's going on here is just hard to believe that God even let this happen. And I think that's what got me to think, what does this tell us about God? Is that God knew the plan. Jesus knew the plan. They knew that God knew he was going to sacrifice his son to save all of us. And God allowed the people to make the decision to crucify him. He allowed other people to be influenced by those people to make that decision. So God gives us freedom. He already kind of knows what we're going to do in one sense with that freedom, but he still gives it to us anyways.
Freedom meaning like free will.
Free will, yes. God allows us to disobey him. He allows us to also serve him, worship him, and glorify him. Which I feel like God really appreciates it. And if we didn't have that free will, the ability to disobey him, then that glorification, that's my word, wouldn't be as meaningful if we had to do it.
Yeah. So you're kind of like, you're pretty zoomed out, kind of like you're thinking mostly of God's sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. I think, did I interrupt you? Sorry. Okay. I think that like I was like in this particular passage, Jesus only says one brief sentence. Yes, it is as you say. Which, and then like it goes on to say that like Pilate questions him again, but Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. And so I was just thinking about like Jesus is the God-man, so he's like what does this tell us about God? I'm also thinking like, well, what is Jesus showing us about like his divinity? Because he is like God and man. And just that I guess it relates to yours. Like he remained silent. He knew what had to be done, and he knew what price had to be paid. And like in a way, it's interesting that he doesn't answer, because like he couldn't be found guilty because he didn't do anything wrong, and so like he could have been like trying to answer and defend himself, but defend himself from what? He wasn't guilty. So that was just kind of like sticking out to me, I guess, as like Jesus is God. So like how he's like that question applies to him in this passage too, I guess. Anything else?
No, I think
That's question one.
that's it. Question two is, what does this tell us about people? And this kind of goes back to God allows us to make our own choices, and He allows us to be influenced by others, just not only Him. And I think this just tells us that that all people, to some degree, have like the crowd mentality, that we are influenced by people. We do have that temptation every day of, what's Mr. Jones doing? Like, is that what I should be doing? Asking yourself that question, and I think that just magnifies as you get into a crowd. If you're in a crowd of 100 people and 99 of those people are doing the same thing, you're going to be inclined to do that same thing without even thinking about it. Just not intentionally making a bad choice, but just being in that group saying, I want to participate in that. I mean, in good ways, you see that everywhere at sporting events. And
good ways, what do you mean?
Well, it's fun to cheer for other teams.
Okay, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, you get into a football game and you start screaming defense or good things. You start screaming good things. You can also scream bad things.
Yeah, you can scream
everyone
bad things
has
at
a
football
good
games too.
everyone has a good referee chant that I admit I haven't jumped into. That would be bad influence. But there's good things that can come from being in groups. I mean, people are influenced by groups, just by their nature, and I think that's because God has designed us to be in community, to lean on each other, to influence each other in good ways, and
well, then there's also the sin nature though. So like the willingness to go along with the group, even if it's not. Yeah.
So when you're in that crowd, like God also gives us other attributes like strength and courage to be that one person to help when their particular community is going the wrong direction, to help stand up by themselves and steer them back in another direction. And if you can get more good than bad in a community, that community will move in the right direction by its nature. Just in this case, though, when there was outrage, it didn't happen that way. I just asked myself how many people in that crowd went home that night and said, "What did I do? What was I chanting for? Why did I do that?"
Yeah, like
and I've been in that situation before where you do something just silly, just for a group of boys. Like I kicked a basketball into, I don't know, 10 years old. I kicked a basketball into a creek and watched it go down. Just being a boy, and the boy lost his basketball. I chased it for like 15 minutes to try to get it back. Aww. And it was a boy nature thing to do, because you were in a group, and I went home and I felt so bad for that. Like, why did I do that? But it was just this nature instinct. So I would like to think a lot of people in that crowd went through and had that same guilt of just that choice, and just being aware of that. Being aware of that's a possibility, can help you maybe just take that split second and be like, no, that's not what I should do in this scenario. I need to think about that. That's not the right thing. What's your thoughts?
I agree that like people are clearly like influenced, like it says in verse 11, like the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. So like, I mean, presumably they were walking around and like telling people like what to say or what to chant, or like getting people to go along with it. So I agree with like that insight, like who went home and was like, wait a second, like, but it doesn't specifically say that necessarily. And either way, it kind of points us to like, as just how easily influenced we are, and not necessarily in a positive way. But also, I think it's interesting that Pilate demonstrates that, like, how easily influenced he is as well, because he also, it says, wanting to satisfy the crowd, he released Barabbas to them and had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Like, which I think is particularly interesting because, like, Pilate wasn't, like, he was no friend of the Jews. And I was reading some commentaries and it was just talking about, like, he would even have reason to be suspicious of anything like that the Jews were presenting to him. And so I just thought it was like, yeah, like the crowd really influenced him quite a bit as well. Yeah. Anything else? That's people. What does it tell us about people?
I want to apologize. We still can't see comments.
Oh no, really?
Yeah, I can't. I see that we have some. I'm not able to look at them, and I don't have them pulled up on my phone. So we apologize for that again. We thought we had that corrected.
Facebook too. The bar horse.
Yeah,
0.
it's not on my phone either.
Darn.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll
comment anyways, then I'll look at them tomorrow.
Yeah. And hopefully you guys can see each other's comments.
Yeah.
But who would we share? What people would we share this with?
I'm gonna lump application in with this question too. Like, what applications?
How would you apply it?
Okay. Yeah, how would you apply it?
I'm gonna go then,
since I pre-thought.
Yep.
Pre-thought changing the question. Oh gosh, I think it's just a difficult piece of, like, the passage. I think that gosh, I don't know. What do you think?
And we're going to blank on this one. I don't know.
I mean, I think it's an important application, how easily we can be influenced. I mean, Jesus arrived in Jerusalem, like, being worshipped. And I mean, this is him receiving the sentence to be crucified. So, I mean, this happened in a short amount of time. And people were actively, like, working against him to be sure that this came to be, like, the chief priest going through and stirring up the crowd. The Sanhedrin picking a specific, like, building a case against Jesus based on treason rather than blasphemy, which was their, like, real opinion of what he had done wrong. Like, the Jews were saying it was blasphemy that he claimed to be God, but what they had him on trial for with Pilate and the Romans was treason for claiming to be a king. So I think, like, it kind of it just points to, like, the nature of, like, the sinful nature of people. So I think that that's something that we all have to be aware of, you know.
I think this shows the importance of putting yourself in that good community, and having those good good guidance and people that aren't going to steer you the same way, knowing that you may be tempted, should be a good thing to share with anyone that you wouldn't want to make sure that they choose good friends or just a good large group of people, or just go to the good gathering such as Sunday church service. I think that'd be a good passage to reference for something like that. Do you have any other thoughts?
I don't think so. I think there's just a lot of, like, kind of back info in the passage, like, just with the political nature. Like people were expecting, like the Jews were expecting a Messiah who would free them from political oppression. And then ironically, Jesus is on trial for a political reason, like they're accusing him of treason. But but that's the same thing that they were like disappointed that he wasn't. So like I think that there's some interesting things to note, like that type of irony. And that the Jews were expecting Pilate to be very harsh with Jesus. And instead, Pilate couldn't find any guilt in him, which I think is also really like just another piece of irony, which I think is kind of neat to identify in the passage.
And I struggle with this too. I don't like to say no to anybody. I like to be hopeful and not disappoint anybody. And Pilate was struggling with that. He had a large group of people calling for his crucifixion, and he didn't know what to do. And in Luke, they actually said that he sent him back to Herod.
Bible names are
because he didn't want to make that decision. That was an easier decision, was just make it someone else's problem. And Herod ended up sending him back to Pilate. And Pilate ultimately gave in to their wishes of crucifixion. But I think people also just greatly relate to that too, of like that's a tough decision to make. And if Pilate would had somebody else to lean upon to help make that decision with, like that would have made it probably would have been a different decision. But of course, God had a plan, and it would be different today of what we would be talking about. But that would just help. Any other thoughts before we close this out in prayer?
I think so.
Yeah, this was the last one. This is the last DPS for this week. The next one will be on Sunday night. I believe there's 4 nights left finishing out Book of Mark. And I'm sorry, we forgot to open in prayer as well.
We did that last time.
Yeah, but I'll close this. God, we just thank you for giving this this great weather and a great resource just to share this. We thank you for everyone that was able to join us tonight, and everyone that may be watching this at a later date. Lord, we just ask that you can be with us, help us reflect upon this and all the other Bible studies in previous nights. Help us just to learn from this, gain courage and strength to be able to share this with others, and God, just help us to continue to grow in your name. We ask you all this in your name. Amen. Well, thanks guys for joining us tonight, and we'll hope to see everyone soon.